Let me start by showing you around this data set that I've compiled for you. At the top, we have a row for each address in Murphysboro, Tennessee, at which a registered sex offender lives, at least one registered sex offender, that is. You can see that in the first column we have the name or names of the registered sex offenders who live at the address. In column B we have the actual address, and in column C we have the number of sex offenders who live there. In most cases, only one offender lives at each address, but in a few cases right there at the top we have quite a number of sex offenders living at the same address. Below the sex offender information, I have rows indicating the address and name of each daycare center in Murphysboro, Tennessee. And below the daycare information, I have rows indicating the address and name of each public school in Tennessee. And that's all the data. Now, the reason I've pulled these three kinds of data together is because, according to Tennessee law, a sex offender who is convicted of a sex crime that involved a child is not allowed to live within 1,000 feet of the property line of a school or a daycare, or in fact any public place where children might tend to congregate, for example a playground or a public park. So one way you could check out how well that law is being enforced would be to put these three kinds of addresses up on a Google map and then look for indications of sex offenders who were living close to schools or daycares, and then check out the records for those particular sex offenders to see if their crimes involve children. So that's exactly what we're going to do using something called Google Fusion Tables. Before I show you how to do that, let me call your attention to these last three columns, actually these last two columns in the data set. Column D, the type, and column E, the marker. The type column simply contains a description of what kind of row each of the rows is. For example, the first rows in the file indicate addresses of offenders, and then when we get down into the daycare information, the type column changes to the word daycare, and then when we get down into the school information, the type column changes to the word school. Meanwhile, the marker columns contain color codes that are going to control what color the dots on the map that we're going to produce will be based on what kind of record each dot represents. For example, a dot that indicates the address of a place where multiple sex offenders live is going to be small and purple, as controlled by the code there, small underbar purple. A small red dot is going to show up at every address where one registered sex offender lives. And scrolling down, a small green dot is going to indicate the location of every daycare center. And finally, a small blue dot is going to indicate the address of every school, every public school in Murphysboro. So that's a quick tour of the data set. Let me show you now how to upload this data set to Google Fusion Tables and make a map out of it. To upload the data file to Google Fusion Tables, start by going to Google Drive. The address is drive.google.com. Now, if you don't already have a Google account, you'll need to create one to complete the exercise. You can do that by clicking the big red sign up button here. I already have a Google account, and in fact my credentials are already here, so I'm going to go ahead and click sign in. And here are the various files I've uploaded over the years to Google Drive. I have quite a few actually. To get started uploading this file, I need to hit the create button right here. And I'm going to choose Fusion Table over here. Now, Google Fusion Tables is going to take me to a window that's asking me to upload some sort of file from my computer. I'm going to click the Browse button and navigate to where the file is. I have it here on a removable disk. There it is. I'm just going to highlight it and click Open. And then finally click Next. And Google Fusion Tables will start importing the file. In this case, the column names are in the first row, and Google Fusion Tables has correctly figured that out. If that were wrong for some reason, I could change it by clicking the down arrow and altering it, but that's just fine. I'm going to click the next button here. And here I could type in information about where these data came from, who I am, the date, and so forth. That's optional. I'm just going to take the defaults here. So I'm going to click Finish. And now Google Fusion Tables is importing the data pretty quickly. Good. Now, notice that the address column here is highlighted in yellow. What that means is that Google Fusion Tables has correctly figured out that that's where the geocode data is. That's where the information is that is going to allow Google Fusion Tables to plot these data on a map. If for some reason that were the wrong column, I could change it by clicking on the down arrow here, choosing Change, and then picking something other than location here in this Type drop-down menu. And then I could go to whichever column the address information is in and do the same and specify that column as the column with the location information. But in this case, Google Fusion Tables got it right, so we're just going to leave it alone. The next thing to do to actually see these data on a map is to click the Map of Address tab right here. And when I click that, Google Fusion Tables is going to start geocoding the data, which means it's going to start plotting the data on the map. Now this can take a little while, so I'm going to just kind of pause the video here while this completes, and then come back when it's closer to actually being done. Google Fusion Tables took about 5 minutes to finish geocoding all that data. That can take more time or less time depending on the speed of your internet connection, the time of day, and all sorts of other things. But when it's done, you should see something like this, a big map with some red dots on it somewhere. Take your mouse and start zooming in on those red dots. You can do this using your mouse wheel. Just push the wheel forward, and the map should start zooming in, and the dots should start spreading out. Let's get to about this level. That's pretty good. So each of those red dots that you see on the map is the address of either a school or a sex offender or a daycare. We can't tell which yet because we haven't assigned colors to the dots depending on which type of record each one represents. But we at least have dots on the map, so that's a good start. Let's have a look now at how to start distinguishing between the dots that are marking the address of a sex offender, a school, or a daycare. To do it, come over to the Tools menu and choose Change Map Styles. By default, you can see that Google Fusion Tables uses only one map color, or one marker color, red. Let's change that by clicking on the column link right here and choose the radio button next to Use Icon Specified in a Column. And remember that we had in our data file a column called Marker, and that column contained those color codes for the map pins. There was a small underbar red, small underbar purple, small underbar green, and so forth. That's the column we need to specify right here. I'm going to click the down arrow and choose the marker column, the column with the codes in it, and then click Save. And when I do that, the map updates to change the color of the markers depending on the type of record involved. And so now we have red markers for addresses of sex offenders, green markers for addresses of daycares, and blue markers for addresses of schools. So it's beginning to get easier to see where sex offenders might be living with respect to schools and daycares. Before we zoom in further, though, I want to point out a couple of strange points we have. There's one red marker here all the way up in Nashville, and there's one down here in College Grove, and there's even one all the way down I-24, a couple all the way down I-24 in Manchester. These are addresses that Google Fusion Tables doesn't know how to plot. Let me just look at this one real quick. Notice, by the way, when you click on a dot, up comes all that information about the record, the name, the address, the offender count, the type, and the marker, and all that sort of thing. But this is an address 1014 Gastonbury Way in Murphysboro, Tennessee. That's the address that was in the database that the sex offender information came from. It's the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's database of registered sex offenders. So apparently there's something wrong with this address. Google Fusion Tables doesn't know how to plot it, and there might be a typo in the address. It might just be an address that doesn't exist. Maybe the sex offender gave an incorrect address. Who knows? There could be lots of explanations, but it's certainly something worth checking out. Why is this supposedly Murphysboro sex offender with a supposedly Murphysboro address getting plotted all the way up in Nashville somewhere? There's just something odd going on there, and there are a few of those in the map, so that could be something worth checking out journalistically. But back to the main task here, which is to find sex offenders who are living close to schools or daycares. It's kind of a jumbled mess right now. Let's zoom in a little bit and get a little detail here. And so now you can begin to see sex offenders that might be kind of close to schools. Here, for example, is a red dot awfully close to a blue dot. Let's see what that's all about. This is, let's see, clicking on the dot, we have James Arnold King, who lives on White Boulevard in Murphysboro. And it looks like he's living pretty close to, let's see who this is, a daycare at Mitchell-Nielsen Primary School. And there's a blue dot over here. That's Mitchell-Nielsen Elementary School. It's a school in downtown Murphysboro. That's pretty close. In fact, we're zoomed in here to the 2,000-foot level. If we go in a little bit further to the 1,000-foot level, there they are. Just comparing the scale there, that looks a little closer than 1,000 feet. So this would be one to check out. Maybe look this fellow up in the TBI database and see if his sex crime involved a minor. And if it did, then he shouldn't be living that close to the school. You'd obviously want to check this out firsthand. If that turns out to be the case, you'd want to go to this address, maybe with a measuring tape or one of those wheel things that measures distance, and just pace off the distance from his property line to the school and see if he's within the law. You'd also, of course, want to verify that he's actually living there. This address could have changed. But anyway, that would be one to check out. Let me show you a trick here. As with ordinary Google Maps, you have both a map view, which emphasizes the street names, and you have a satellite view, so you can get a good look at what's really going on the ground. If I click the satellite view, then I can see just kind of what all is between him and the school, and so forth. And it looks like he's a little closer than he appears on the map view. Here's his address, probably that house right there. And let's see, there's the school, and this area between the two is actually the playground of the school. So he's really close to the property line of the school. So that's definitely one to check out. Now let's switch back to the map view here and zoom back out. So there might be others of those on the map that would be worth checking out. Okay, so that's how to get your data up on a map and how to color code it according to the type of record each dot represents. Next up, we'll look at something called buckets that can let you do something else. We've been focusing so far on where sex offenders live relative to the locations of daycares and schools. But let's turn for a minute to looking at which addresses have multiple sex offenders living at them. I'm going to start by filtering out just the everything except the offender address information. And you can see that we already have some hint toward what we're trying to figure out here. Remember, we had codes in the data set that specified a purple dot for addresses that had 2 or more sex offenders living there, and a red dot for addresses that had only 1 living there. So you can look right here and see where the purple dots are and know that those are addresses with multiple sex offenders. But let's get a little more fine-grained about it. We're going to do it using a tool called buckets. To begin, click on Tools over here, and again choose Change Map Styles, and click on Buckets right here. Okay, and let's see. To set this up, I remember from the database that there was no address that had more than 100 sex offenders living at it. So let's use that as our maximum. We can just leave that there. And let's split the rest of the data up into, oh, click the radio button here so we can access all of this. And let's split the data up into 3 buckets. You could choose whatever number you want. And let's see, let's have our highest category be addresses where there are 3 or more sex offenders living there. So that would be 3 up to 100. And then in the middle category, let's have those addresses be addresses where 2 sex offenders are living. And then we'll have our smallest category be addresses where only 1 sex offender is living. And it might be good too to change the color coding here. Let's see, the addresses with only 1 sex offender living there, those would be kind of the least threatening, I suppose. So let's go with a small green dot there. Just think of this as kind of like a traffic light. The middle category, let's make that yellow to indicate maybe some caution. And then the biggest category there, let's make that red to indicate a lot more caution. And by default, Google Fusion Tables has picked the offender count column as the column to base this on because it was the only numeric column in the database. We could have specified a different one here if we wanted to, but that's the one we're going to use. Remember that the offender count column in the data is the one that specifies how many offenders live at each address. So that's the one we want. Okay, this is ready to go, so let's click Save and see what we get. Okay, so now it becomes pretty easy to spot the addresses that have a lot of registered sex offenders at them. For example, this one here, let's see, this is 940 New Salem Road in Murphysboro, and there are a whopping 19 sex offenders living there. That's a lot. But if you think about it, this really isn't too surprising. 940 New Salem Road happens to be the address of the Rutherford County Jail. So these are all registered sex offenders who are presently in jail. So we can maybe go looking somewhere else. How about, let's see, how about this one up here? This is on East Clark Boulevard, and there are 3 sex offenders living there. Let's maybe zoom in a little bit and see what we can learn about that. There it is. Maybe our whoops, dot disappeared. Maybe the satellite view would show us something a little bit more. Let's zooming in a little bit. This looks like probably an apartment complex would be my guess. And look at that right there. There's a swimming pool, and that might be something to check out. Swimming pools attract children, right? And so if this is a sex offender whose crime involved a child, that could be a dangerous situation. It's not an illegal situation, but maybe something worth looking at. Let's go back to map view here and zoom out some more. How about let's see, how about this one down here? This is down South Church Street. There are 13 sex offenders living there, and this one is actually the center of town. This is the courthouse. And the reason all these people here is because these are people who are homeless, people who have no specific address. So Google Fusion Tables puts them in the right over the courthouse in Murphysboro. But these are folks who we don't know where they live, or even if they're still in Murphysboro. Here's the one I was looking for down here. It's down South Church Street. Here we go. There are 18 sex offenders living here, and the address is 2025 South Church Street. Let's see what's there. Clicking on the satellite view and zooming in a little bit. What we have here is let's see. There we are. This is the Regal Inn in Murphysboro. This is a low-end motel in Murphysboro that offers weekly rates, and the people who live here are typically about a step above being homeless. They live in these hotel rooms as if they were apartments, And there are apparently quite a number of registered sex offenders living there. There are also quite a number of children, so that might be another situation worth looking into. Again, not necessarily illegal. There's no law against registered sex offenders living in an apartment complex or a hotel where children are, but it doesn't take much imagination to imagine that those children might be at risk. So that could be another situation worth checking out. But the thing to see here is how to use buckets to control the color of your map indicators based on some value, in this case the number of sex offenders living at a given address. Finally, let's look at how to share your map so that I and other people will be able to look at it. To do that, look for the big blue Share button and click on that. And you'll see this dialog box. By default, Google Fusion Tables sets your map and tables as private so that you're the only one who can see it. And what we need to do is change that by clicking on the Change link here to, let's go with anyone with the link. Just like that. Just click that radio button and then choose Save. And then what you want to do is copy this URL, this link to share, copy that and send that to me so that I can follow that link and go have a look at your table for grading purposes. Okay, so that's how to use Google Fusion Tables to plot points on a map, and hope you find this useful.